What's going on, everyone? Obviously, we have a huge Jujutsu Kaisen chapter to talk about, probably one of the biggest reveals in the last 20 or 30 chapters. Blew up the internet, broke the internet. Pretty divisive chapter, to say the least. You either love it or you hate it. So, a lot to talk about today. But, as always, we'll give everyone a few minutes to get started. Soul, what's going on, man? You know, funny thing is, I meant to hit you up last night. I just got busy with content stuff, and then I was also playing World of Warcraft with somebody. But yeah, you and I definitely gotta talk about this chapter for sure. Yeah, but as always, we'll give everyone a few minutes to jump in the stream before we get started. For context, I did see the spoilers, and I didn't read the scan chapter, but I know what happens, so this isn't so much a live reaction, but I do have some things to say. Other than that, I'm excited to read all the chapters today because we got, obviously, JJK is huge. It's on the cover. We got new One Piece today, right? Yep. Hoping that we're in Elbaf this week. What else we got? Kagurabachi. We got the follow-up to a little trial or committee hearing, whatever was going on with the Kamunabi. Caught back up with Kagurabachi, by the way. I caught up because I was a couple chapters. No, I wasn't behind. Well, to clarify, I reread Kagurabachi from the beginning. And I do have to say, to everyone who saw my take on Twitter a while ago, my opinion of Kagurabachi has improved. It's much more coherent than I remember. The pacing is phenomenal. And I just think it's a great story. Yeah, a lot of people agree. A lot of people aren't crazy about the Nobara reveal. I talked to a bunch of people this weekend who explained to me how this was built up to, how there was some foreshadowing. I just think the biggest problem, and we'll get into it, is the fact that, like, it kind of comes out of nowhere in a sense, but more so the fact that, like, the manga's going to end in what, 4 chapters, 3 chapters, and this is when she's coming back. Like, it's crazy. The timing is very weird. I also am not a fan of, like, the execution, but we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. Like I said, we'll give everyone a few more minutes. Reading this weekly is very confusing when keeping up with 6 series. Yeah. Calling me a yapper? How am I a yapper? Please elaborate on what exactly you disagree with. Yeah, I've noticed, especially recently, how reading weekly, it's easy to sort of forget a lot of the recent chapters. Because when you can kind of binge it, everything seems fresher. But like when you're following a manga, and the manga only puts out like 38 chapters a year, 38 chapters over the course of a year is a long time versus reading 38 chapters in 1 or 2 hours. Like, that's crazy. That's the biggest problem. The manga ends in like 4 chapters. Yeah, so it's like what are you really going to add to the story? Same thing is happening with Chainsaw Man? What do you mean? I don't really care anymore if she's alive or not. It's just that it just feels like it's too late to bring her back. Yeah. I think part of the problem is like the story is over, so it doesn't really serve any sort of, it doesn't carry a lot of emotional weight. Like to say that she's back, it's like if the Lakers are playing a season and LeBron James gets an injury and he's supposedly out for the season, but they're like he might come back. It's like if LeBron James came back, you know, in like game whatever, 55 out of 60. It's like you missed 55 other games or 54 other games. Like, you know, you missed the whole season. Like, what are you going to play for 5 games and then be like, oh, I played the season. I'm back. It's like, okay, you're back for 5 games. Right? That's just my sort of silly hypothetical. But the point being that, like, it's kind of cheating to say that they're back when they're only back for like 5 chapters. That's another reason why, like, I'm really curious to see how the last couple of chapters play out and what kind of epilogue we get. Because if we get a meaningful epilogue or sort of like, you know, what happens after, right? Like what next? Then that could change my opinion of it, right? If we get to see sort of what happens with the characters and the time after the main events, that's another thing. But like if the characters just sort of like, you know, have a barbecue and they're like, oh man, glad we got that over with, and then the story ends, bro, I'm gonna be pissed. How many successful shonen manga have you authored? Oh yeah, 0, so stop saying there's a problem with JJK. I can say whatever I want because there's no objectively right or wrong thing to say about a manga. All the meaning of a story is subjective. So if you don't like what I have to say, good for you. What's going on, Blazing Boy? Pleasure to have you for this JJK Weekly Shonen Jump stream. Rent a Girlfriend is obviously the best manga ever, and you know what? I can't tell you you're wrong. I can certainly say that I disagree, but I can't tell you you're wrong. I feel like Gege himself wasn't sure if she was alive or not for a while. Yeah, that's what it kind of felt like. How am I doing, Raj? I'm doing good. I'm generally happy with the JJK chapter, but I do have my problems. How you doing, man? Thanks for asking. Did I read Akane Banashi? No, I'm a few chapters behind on JJK. All right. We've given everyone enough time. Let's talk about this chapter. So, chapter 267. I was kind of curious about the color page. It is nice to get like an updated color page of the, you know, Gojo Yuji team in the most recent art style, right? It's like a nice callback. I will say, I don't really get what's going on with the dogs, right? I think it's just, you know, a cool thing. So I like it. I like the color page. Plus we got nice JJK Team 7 vibes. So we open with what seems to be like Yuta and Gojo having an inner dialogue because their bodies are switched. It threw me off at first. This is like week 2 where I've been thrown off at the beginning of a chapter. So then they're talking about, you know, what happened in the last chapter and what this plan was they had going in the background. Yuta says, or excuse me, Gojo in Yuta's body, because they're in each other's bodies. Pause. So that's why they're switched. Yuta says, or again, I keep mixing it up. Gojo says, you want Sukuna's last finger. Yuta wants to be able to copy Malevolent Shrine. Gojo's like, yeah, no. He's talking about how that would be a good idea, but it isn't enough to get you an analytical breakdown of Malevolent Shrine. So basically saying, we could give you the finger, but it's not really going to be as helpful as you think it is. And then they kind of expand on how copy works and how if it's just sort of a normal ability, he can kind of eat whatever, or Rika can kind of eat whatever body part. But if it's a particularly strong body part, he has to eat a vital body. Or if it's a particularly strong technique, he has to eat a vital body part, like an organ or something like that. So then they talk about more of how Yuta's ability works and like if somebody regenerates, blah, 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 blah. All important stuff, but I feel like it's not super important to the broader discussion of this chapter. And then they talk about resonance, right? So they do kind of in this chapter build up to the big reveal, even if in the broader scheme of things, there doesn't feel like there's a ton of build up to it. So then they talk about how like they're kind of planning this on the side and not telling Yuji all the details. I'll give Itadori the minimum amount of data and tactical information needed. It makes sense to be careful, but even if we sense a big physical change, the resonance between Sukuna and Itadori shouldn't reveal what Itadori's thinking or the information he possesses. Basically, the idea is because Yuji and Sukuna still have this kind of connection, they want to not tell Yuji so much about the plan so that Sukuna doesn't catch on to it. So then we come back to the present time and we kind of get the explanation for what's going on with Yuji's fingers. One was one that Sukuna took, and another one they just cut off and they're using it to put a binding vow on Sukuna. Then, of course, Nobara makes her big reveal. We see that she's got an eye patch and that she is, in fact, alive. Besides her eye patch, she seems to be perfectly fine. No scars or anything, just, you know, one less eye. She says, you better be happy, boys. Uses resonance on Yuji's finger, which I suppose would have been Sukuna's finger. So as a result, he can't use Curse Domain. So now Yuji is able to use his techniques on Sukuna. And he still has one of the gauntlets, which is weird because I thought Sukuna broke both of them. So they're exchanging blows. Sukuna says Yuji hasn't been able to heal his wounds because of his technique, so he's way past his limits. But then, probably my favorite part of the chapter, to be honest, is we get to see Yuji use Black Flash, which I think is super cool. Because it's such a simple attack, but it's become so iconic and so tangled with Yuji's role in the story that whenever he uses it, it's just so cool. And then we see that it does appear to do some serious damage to Sukuna. And then that's kind of the chapter. So let me look at chat real quick before I share my thoughts. Where are we? I'm on the side of Nobara being back. Yeah, I do have to say, I agree with Sammy. It is still too early to kind of definitively say, like, was it worth it to bring her back? My gut says this is really the height of what she's going to contribute to this fight. I think she's really just going to do this, right? I mean, she's literally miles away. So, kind of limited to just using resonance. And even then, like, how many more times are you going to do it? But like I said, depending on how Gege wraps up the story and sort of the epilogue of things, I think it's still too early. I don't think it's a matter of, like, this being an ass pull, right? Because half the fan base thought she was coming back, right? And they even said as soon as she, you know, sort of was out for that count in Shibuya, they specifically said she might make it out of this, but it's kind of up to her and how tough she is. So we got an explicit mention that, hey, she's not dead. She might come back. Even though so many times it looked like she was confirmed to be dead. Like just 2 or 3 chapters ago, when Yuji was talking about like all the friends he had lost, Nobara was next to like Gojo and Choso and other characters that had died. So the implication was, yeah, she's dead. So it was this weird back and forth of like, well, she's going to come back eventually, right? And then it's like, well, yeah, she definitely seems kind of dead. It's been a while. So she was gone for so long. I think this is the big problem that people who don't like this have, is it's not so much the fact that it happened, it's the execution. Because for me, I always wanted Nobara to come back. I think it just made too much sense. It just, plus just the vibe of JJK, it always felt like we were going to end with Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara still being together at the end of the story, right? It just felt like that. But the fact that she comes back, like, right before the story ends, it's like, Again, it's like this thing of like, say you're a football player and at the beginning of the season, you get a crazy injury and they're like, yeah, you're going to be out till November, right? At least. So for the whole season, you don't get any plays. And then they bring you back 2 games before the season ends. It's like, okay, did you really come back though? Like, what does come back mean? Come back is like, you're here for the story, right? But she didn't come back for the story. She came back for the ending. So effectively, she is, like, for practical purposes, she is dead for the entire rest of the story after Shibuya. She just makes it back for the ending, right? So it feels kind of cheap, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Not a fan of the Viz translation. Yeah, I'm not sure about that one. Again, I also didn't read the scan. Why not just bring her back in the Culling games? See, that's the thing, is like, I don't even know if she should have come back in the Culling games necessarily. I think maybe having her come back at the end of the Culling games, sort of when everyone was regrouping and they got Gojo back, I think that would have been a better time to do it. Because to bring her back in Culling games would have been kind of random, right? Especially since, like, Culling games is basically right after Shibuya. So for a character to be, like, practically dead and then come back, like, 15 chapters later, it's like, that feels kind of stupid. Just looking at the rest of the chat. If she was brought back in the Culling games, the resonance plan would have been a disaster. Exactly. That was the other thing, is like, they needed Yuji not to know about this, because otherwise Sukino would have seen it coming a mile away. People make no sense. The resonance plan would have stayed the same. What could have Sukuna done to change it? Killed Nobara. I feel like that's pretty easy, right? In this case, right, like, if Nobara still came back when she did, but somehow Sukuna found out about the plan, there is a question of, like, what would he have done about it, really? That's a good question. I don't know. But it is Sukuna, and he is someone who's managed to kill Gojo twice, basically. So to say, like, there's nothing he could have done about it, about the person who's, like, at the top of the world of curses, it's like, he probably could have done something. And it's not like the characters want to take that chance, right? Because otherwise they would have just said, oh yeah, here's all our plans. Obviously, they need to have an element of surprise when they're dealing with such an OP character. The only way Sukuna would know about the plan is if Yuji knew, which presumably mean he also knew where she was. Yeah. So the best time would have been after Sukuna jacks Megami's body and when they release Gojo. Not exactly that time. I don't think you could have had her come back in the Culling games because, like I said, she seemingly died in the arc right before that. So, like, if you're going to have a character die and then come back, there has to be enough time to let the death sort of have a visible impact on the story. Like, there has to be time for that absence to be felt. Otherwise, there's no absence and the death is pointless, right? it's almost like they didn't die at all. Could Yuji have healed his fingers? That's kind of what they talked about in this chapter of like Yuta using his copy ability, and if he eats a body part and they grow it back, does it affect his ability to copy the ability? So they kind of talked about that a little bit. I think that's why Yuji didn't heal his fingers. But in terms of like the end of the story, I mean, it's JJK. I think he'll grow back his fingers. And if not, it's like, whatever. He's missing 2 of his 10 fingers. If you fight Sukuna and you walk out of it and you just lost 2 fingers, I think you would consider yourself pretty lucky. So I'll share my thoughts generally on what I like about this reveal and what I don't like. So what I do like, first of all, like I said, I generally like that Nobara is back in the story. JJK, for as edgy as it comes off and as, meat-headed as it comes off, it's very much a shonen battle series. And like every other classic battle series, it's all about, like the main crew, right? Like in One Piece, the Straw Hats and Bleach, Ichigo and his crew, Naruto, Team 7, right? Dragon Ball, the Z Fighters, like you have your crew. JJK has its crew, and for a while they've been apart, right? But you do kind of need that sort of like family back, because it would be kind of depressing if like by the end of the story, like basically Yuji is the only one left. And as much as I think people would be philosophical and psychological and deeper meaning and blah 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 blah, I just don't think JJK is that depressing of a story. Like, it's not that kind of story. It is at times, but it isn't. So I do like that Nobara's back for that reason. The issue I have with this reveal is I talk to people, and without going into too much detail, they explain to me like, oh, there was build up for this and blah 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 and such and such. It's just like there's build up in the sense that you do get these random nods to Nobara and how important she is to Yuji in the story up to this point, right? Like, let's say every 30 chapters or so, every 50 chapters or so. The problem is it's felt, not so much it seemed, but it felt as though every time we got a reference to Nobara, it increasingly seemed as though like each one was more so saying like, yeah, she's not coming back, right? I mean, especially in the last one, in chapter like 265, I think it was, when Yuji's giving his speech about how like there is no good and evil and everyone just inherently has value, and like the value of people is like bits of memories, such and such, right? And you see that spread of all the people he's lost, like Junpei, like Nanami, like Choso, and Nobara is in that spread. And it's like, oh, well, she's definitely dead. Like, this basically confirms it, right? And then she comes back. So part of it is, the issue I have with it is the execution. And the reason I don't like the execution is, one, timing. And the timing feels off because, A, it's like, oh, well, she's back. It's like, Well, no, they brought her back for the ending. They didn't bring her back for the story. She's been gone for like 100 chapters. And then it's also awkwardly timed because at this point in the story, we've kind of come to terms with her death, right? Like, it's too late. Like, too early would have been Culling Games because you wouldn't have had this time to feel the impact of her absence, and her death would have been null and void, basically. But by this point, you've kind of gotten everything you can out of her death. And when she does come back, the characters have kind of moved on. So in a way, it's so late that like the characters aren't still in mourning. So like it's not as emotionally raw. Like, it's not still fresh for them, right? Like, they've kind of gotten over it a little bit. Not completely, right? Because it is their friend. Like, if a dead friend came back, 20 years, you'd be like, what? Right? So in that sense, like, you're never really over it. But at the same time, it's like, they've moved on. Shit's happened. So when she comes back, it's like, yeah, you kind of missed your point. You kind of missed your opening. The only other issue I have with the execution, so the two issues I have with the execution of this is one, timing, for the reasons I discussed, and the other issue is just like what they bring her back for. They bring her back just to use resonance on Sukuna, like miles away from the fight, which it does have a big impact. Now, until we see otherwise, Sukuna can't use his domain, and Yuji is able to kind of fight toe to toe. So she does contribute to the fight more than a lot of the other characters, honestly. But like, it feels silly. It's like she's supposed to, like, the weight of this moment feels diminished because it's supposed to be like this big epic comeback of one of Yuji's best friends, and they bring her back like totally away from the fight just to kind of play this support role, right? I don't know. It's like, in a lot of ways it hits, and in a lot of other ways I'm like, man, I wish he would have done this differently. I'd argue the speech where they flash to Nobara is in Yuji's perspective, and people he perceives to be gone, so I never really took that as confirmation. But that's the thing, right? Like, the author's never really gonna say, like, oh, well, they're definitely dead. There's no chance that they'll ever come back, so don't get your hopes up, right? But at the same time, like, to see that character with all of those other characters who are definitely dead, it's like, okay, this is as close to an explicit confirmation as you're gonna get. And to all the people in the chat who are like, oh, bro, you're yapping. Oh, bro, let KK cook. I'm not saying he completely ruined it. I already said I generally like how this is done, but it's far from perfect. It's definitely not my favorite comeback in this series, first of all. Never mind in a bunch of other manga. So I don't need to say that, like, oh, it's the most hype moment in JJK. I can still acknowledge that it's a cool moment and also recognize that there's a bunch of issues with how it was executed. They also didn't bring her back. Utahime says Nobara herself awoke less than an hour ago. It's just good fortune, like Sukuna's good luck when Yuji did not include himself in the binding vow. That is something to consider, right? The fact that she only woke up like just recently. But at the same time, like, the way they set it up in this chapter, it does feel as though they were kind of planning for this as a contingency. In other words, like, they weren't solely relying on this, but they were planning for it as if, you know, it was something that they needed to do in accordance with all the other bullshit they pulled in this arc. She should have come back at least 5 chapters before. I'm not going to put a number on it, but at least here, 5 chapters before the ending, does feel kind of awkward. They had numerous plans as seen. Yeah. No, of course. Nobody's saying, like, this is the one thing they were planning to do. I'll ask everyone this. How would you rate this chapter? The whole chapter, not just the Nobara reveal, but the explanation of Yuta's abilities, the explanation of what they did with Yuji's fingers, the timing of Nobara jumping into the fight, the execution of the reveal of her comeback, and then the execution of how that's applied to the fight. And then, of course, Yuji being able to use Black Flash. Combine that all together, how would you rate this chapter? Blazing Boy said 7. Newt Brooks said 8 out of 10. Yeah, I'd say it's like an 8. Solid 8. As much as I have issue with the execution of the Nobara reveal, I do think it's a cool moment. And I love Yuji using Black Flash against Sukuna. That in pairing with Nobara's resonance feels like a callback to early JJK, which is a nice thing to have in these final chapters. Jaden said a 5. A 5 is being harsh. I think it's better than mid. I think it's better than just okay. Soul said 7.5 to 8. Yeah, I think that's fair. Again, I'd say like an 8. Yuji's been spamming Black Flash, nothing spectacular. Sure, but, you know, the timing of this particular one working together with Nobara, similar to how he paired up with her in the Death Womb Painting or Cursed Womb Painting arc. It's a nice callback. Yeah, so I think most people would give this chapter like a 7 or an 8. I'll ask this. How do people feel about Nobara as a character in general? Obviously, we still have, what is it, like 4 chapters left? So there's time to sort of put a nice capstone on her character arc. There was so many foreshadowing about her being alive. Okay. Would you care to elaborate? Because I'd love to know the specific examples so I can quote them later. Because when people have said, oh yeah, there's so much buildup, I was like so much. love her. I love her character. Nobara is an 8, so presumably 8 out of 10. She only slept 5 weeks, not that much, and no one moved on. As you said, they knew she was fine. They didn't tell Yuji because of fear of Sukuna connection revealing it. She's a plot device. So I'm getting 2 very conflicting stories. Interesting. When did they say that she had only been in a coma for 5 weeks? Because I don't remember them mentioning 5 weeks. Does anybody have a chapter when they mention that? She feels like a plot device at times. I think that's the biggest problem, is like, she is a cool character, and Gege does do a good job of fleshing out her character personality wise, especially with her flashback. But she does kind of have a weird way of contributing to fights. Like somebody said, she's not a fighter, so strength isn't really her thing. So she's kind of relegated to being a support character almost. And so her ability can kind of feel cheap at times. So, I mean, it is kind of weird. Her personality is top tier, similar to Gojo. Yeah, no, I like her as a character, but when I kind of reflect on like what role she played in the broader story of Jujutsu Kaisen, I'm like, well, she had a cool moment with Yuji in the death painting arc. You know, she had some cool moments in Shibuya. Then with the Mahito thing, it's like, sort of, right? Cool moments, but also like, what did she do? And then she was gone for like the whole rest of the story, just to come back to be, as you guys are saying, not me, a plot device. She bullied Momo using a squeaky hammer. Excuse me. What? It doesn't need to be a strong point. There wasn't a strong point to her death in story that makes every single other death 100 times more clear. Not really sure what you're talking about, but her death not having a strong point is completely not true. Her death is what pushes Yuji over the edge and drives him batshit crazy in Shibuya. So if you're trying to say that her death isn't supposed to have a big impact on the story, that's just not true. She's a better version of Sakura? They're kind of completely different characters, but I do see what you're saying. I'm not a big fan of this trend in the community where, like, we have to compare every prominent female character to Sakura. To be fair, I hate Sakura. I think she's a terrible character. That being said, not every important female character in shonen manga is a take on Sakura. So, where is it? I just had it. They left her death open-ended and had a few implications that certain people were kept in the dark about her status, those people being Megumi and Yuji. I vaguely remember them talking about this at random points, like, oh, yeah, we're still monitoring Nobara, but we don't want to tell Yuji and Megami. So I think I need to go back and reread, because evidently nobody can specifically remember when they said these things. It's more just like small moments where they kept reminding us that Nobara is still in the picture. She's just kind of, benched for the time being. But even considering that every now and again the characters would be like, hey, don't sort of backlog Nobara. She's going to just remember that she's still a part of the story. She's just kind of on the bench right now. Even considering that we got reminders that Nobara is still in the story, the biggest issue I have is that she didn't really come back, right? Like, she did, but she didn't. She came back for the ending, but, she's been gone for like half the story. So it's this weird mixed feeling of like, oh, cool. I love that you're in the ending. I love that you contributed to the fight. But now it's like, Anime Balls Deep predicted this entire chapter. Well, you know what? Good for them. Those are some cool dudes. I think now Nobara is back next chapter. Someone's going to kill her. I'm just saying this right now, and you guys can quote me. If Nobara dies in the ending, JJK goes down like a whole letter grade for me. The ending, anyway. Bro, so many have been in Copium for 4 years. They are strong. Yeah, this is kind of like the big flip on the Bleach community when everyone was memeing on Bleach, and then it came back and everyone had the receipts, and all the people who, were Bleach fans that whole time, suddenly they didn't look so stupid. Everyone was memeing on the Nobara fans, saying, hey man, you have a drug problem. You gotta quit that copium. Now they don't look so stupid, now do they? If Nobara dies again, that'd be the most in-character thing Gege could ever do. I mean, he's already done it with one character, right? He already did it with Gojo. Brought him back just to kill him off again, just to bring him back, just to basically kill him off again. So like 3-4 times he's done it. And that's just one character. You could say he's done the same thing with Toji, basically. I don't know how exactly they kill Nobara off when she's currently like so far away from... That's the other thing too, right? Is one, just in context, it would be stupid if she died. In addition to that, if she somehow dies when she's completely away from the battlefield, that would just add to the fact of like, dude, what the hell was that? If Gojo comes back, fans are going to beg for more. I mean, fans are going to beg for more regardless. It's the same with, Naruto, Bleach, right? When One Piece ends, everyone's going to beg for a One Piece sequel of some kind, regardless of how elitist they think they are. And they're like, oh, just let it die. Everyone's going to want a One Piece sequel. And the same is true for JJK. People are going to, be dying for the anime, for new seasons, and they're going to want more content. Justin, what's going on? Pleasure to have you. Glad you could join us as we're wrapping up our JJK discussion. We have been talking about JJK for like 50 minutes. So I definitely don't want this to end. We're having good conversation, but we will move on to One Piece and other chapters at some point. Gojo is the one character I think should stay dead. Unlike Nobara, his character arc would be complete when Sukuna is beaten. I can see how Gege could justifiably bring Gojo back in a way where you get a satisfying sort of capstone to his arc, right? Because part of his thing is like making sure the future generation is ready. So if he comes back and gets to kind of have this moment in the end where he kind of, like, let's say there's a time skip and he sees that the new generation is kind of doing their own thing and it's better off than when he entered this world, it would be great for him. That being said, I can see how that would be seriously divisive. How many DMs did I get after this reveal? I didn't get any DMs, but I definitely saw the internet like break apart. Like, people lost their minds. This is like bigger than some of the biggest One Piece reveals. Not like Year 5th big, but you know, huge. We haven't seen this kind of reveal. This is like almost as big as the Gojo reveal. I'll ask everyone this, just to kind of get a feel for how everyone's feeling. Should Gojo come back for the final chapters? Should Gojo be in the very end of Jujutsu Kaisen? So I got 2 no's. No, no. I think most people are going to say no. Nah, keep him down, maybe as a flashback or a nod, but not as a revival situation. Yeah, I think something else you could do too is like, you kind of make a reference to Gojo, right? Like, if everyone's kind of happy, you make a reference to Gojo, suggesting to readers that, like, you know, Gojo can rest easy now. Like, he accomplished what he set out to. I think that would be a good way to do it without having to bring him back. No, he shouldn't. He played his part. I think we are only going to see him in flashbacks of that 1 month time skip. If he comes back, then everyone can come back. I mean, we've already established that nobody is officially dead in Jujutsu Kaisen. I mean, that's just a fact. Everyone can come back. Yeah, there's a lot of characters that people want to come back. I'll ask everyone this. So, Sukuna and Yuji are seemingly head-to-head right now, like toe-to-toe. Like, they're basically just boxing it out at this point. What are your expectations for the end of this fight? And also, what are your predictions for how this fight ends? So, for example, do we think this fight is going to end in the next chapter? Do we think it's going to end 2 chapters from now? Do we think it's going to last until the very last chapter? Also, how is Yuji going to stop Sukuna? Like, is he literally just going to box him until he kind of overpowers him? Is he going to finally master his cursed domain, right? Use some new ability? What do we think? Two more chapters? Yeah, that's about how I'm feeling. I feel like we'll get 1 or 2 chapters for epilogue stuff and then 2 chapters for the fight. I think self-sacrifice is still on the table. I think it'll end in a couple of chapters. I'm not going to lie. I would not like it if Yuji sacrificed himself. I think it could be done well, but I don't think I'll like the ending if Yuji isn't around. That's also just a bias. I generally don't like it when the main characters don't make it to the end. It can be done really well, but usually it just doesn't feel right. So I'm kind of surprised. There's more people than I thought saying that Yuji is going to pass away. And more than a few people seem to think that this is kind of foreshadowed almost by what his grandfather told him. Let's do this. Where are we? Let's put it to a vote. Let's see what everyone says. Again, I personally think that it can be done well, but my gut says, on top of all the other issues people already have with the ending, I don't think having Yuji sacrifice himself is the best idea. Even ignoring, the impulsive, inflammatory reactions to it, I think even with time, people will generally feel as though he should have survived. I can definitely see it happening, but my gut says no thank you. We'll give it like one more minute. See if anyone else wants to contribute. Again, do we think Yuji will survive? All right. We got 14 votes. Can we get one more? Making an even 15? I think the OG trio are going to survive. Yeah, that's another thing. So we'll do another vote. Because I'm curious to see what people think about Megumi. There we go. All right. Let's go. Where are we? So 66% of people think Yuji is going to survive. Yeah. Again, I think it just needs to be in the end. So we'll do another quick one. Let's see what people think. Where are we? So do we think the Yuji trio will all survive? So do we think Yuji, Nobara, and Megumi will all be present in the final chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen? I'm not so sure about Megumi, right? Because at this point, I don't know what's going to happen with Megumi, especially considering, the conversation we had between Yuji and Megumi. I'm not so sure. I would love to see it, but I don't know how likely it is with Megumi. they're not winning, there's going to be a bad ending. I don't know about that one. Megami dying is bad timing? I don't know about that one. I will say, now that we're kind of talking about it, I think there's a serious discussion to be had of how Jujutsu Kaisen handles its character deaths. And of course, we can't really have a definitive discussion on it until we see the story through to the end. But I mean, you have Nobara, you have Gojo, you have Toji, you have Megami, depending on what happens with Megami, right? So it's this weird flip of like 100, 150 chapters ago. People were like convinced that JJK had solved the character death problem of shonen battle series. That like when a character dies in JJK, they die, it has a huge impact, they stay dead, and it means something. And like a dozen times we've seen that that is not the case. We have seen so many characters come back. So it's like 50-50 of like, there are characters who have died and stayed dead, and it did have some impact. You know, varying levels of emotional impact on readers. But then you have like this, what feels like an overwhelming majority at this point, of characters like Gojo, like Toji, like Nobara now, that seemed like they were dead or gone in the story, and they come back. And it's like, well, it's not as consistent as we thought it was. So 76% of people, and we got 17 votes, 76% of people think the whole Yuji trio will be present, will be alive for the end of JJK. Interesting. So, interesting theories to sort of keep in mind as we approach, you know, the final few chapters. But I think the general belief, the general theory, is that all three of these characters are going to be fine. Maybe scarred, maybe injured. Nobara was never dead, right? I mean, we thought she was dead. We thought she was never coming back. Let's not, you know, talk about the fact that there was a whole debate of, was she coming back, right? Like, she was out of the story, so effectively she was dead. On that note, I think we've kind of talked about this chapter, at least, as much as we can. We could talk about JJK, things like the Heian era flashback. You know, we could talk about other stuff. But we've gotten our sort of review of the chapter. I would give this chapter like an 8. It's got a lot of hype moments, but it's definitely not perfect. Again, I'm curious to see how the next 3 or 4 chapters play out and what kind of treatment these characters get from Gege. On that note, we're going to move on to One Piece, because as much as I wanted to talk about Jujutsu Kaisen today, I am very excited to see what happened with One Piece. So, also, for all of you folks out there who aren't caught up on One Piece, obviously there's going to be some One Piece spoilers. So we're on chapter 1124, Close Friend. We get the next chapter in Yamato's journey, Yamato's Golden Harvest, preventing an abduction on the road to Kuri. So she's protecting this random girl, and we see this silhouette of a person running away. So we don't know who it is. Interesting. It's kind of hard to make out who that would be. I honestly have no idea. But let's see what happens. So we cut to the Vivi crew on the I forget this character's name. The big news guy, the Birdman, the newspaper guy. It's time to get the dance floors of the world bouncing, folks. We've got a fresh set list of tracks packed full of new news. That's kind of redundant, new news. Give them fear, paint a picture of utter disaster in the future. They're desperate for information, and the only place they'll get it is the next World Economic Journal. Then, of course, we cut to Vivi. You're incorrigible. Vegapunk spoke of hope as well. God. I could just read a whole manga about Vivi, and I would be happy. I'd be a good man. I'd be a happy man. JJKU has changed video? What? Don't tell me how to run my stage. Or I'll tell them where you're hiding. Oh, did I say something to offend you, you falsehood amplifying albatross? That's a weird insult. The intelligent people of the world won't be manipulated by your lies. So Walpole is in the background trying to calm Vivi down. Like, yeah, listen, if you piss this guy off and he kicks us out, we're screwed. So we cut to... Oh my god, why can I not remember this guy's name? Mr. Big News. So do you really want to take that attitude with me, princess? Sure it won't set you back in the days ahead? I'm sure if the world is going to be destroyed, I don't expect to live through it. Oh, why would you say that? God damn it. We just talked about foreshadowing and character deaths and people saying this and that. Why the F would you say that, Vivi? You can't be doing shit like that. God damn it. Now she's gonna die. God damn it. Oda, I swear to God. I swear to God, if you kill my favorite character, I will never read this manga again. God damn it. Of course, why did she have to go say that? Alright, look at this. A whole pile of juicy stories. Blackbeard versus Trafalgar Law. Shanks versus Kid. Luffy murders Vegapunk. Yeah, I was going to say. Not true. So we cut to Egghead. We get a picture of, what's his name? The sumo guy. Having a moment, right? Vegapunk was his dude, his buddy. So the admirals are talking about what happened. They're asking, is everyone dead? Every last one is asleep and foaming at the mouth. Obviously, because the characters were using their Conqueror's hockey and it wiped everyone out. I'll have a report sent in once the youngins wake up. So interesting. So now he says, all right, Sakazuki, tell me something. Have you ever killed a close friend? He's talking about, we get sort of a flashback between him and Vegapunk. Kizaru says, man, you got a big head. Introduces himself. Vegapunk is talking about what his island is going to be like. So Kizaru and Vegapunk go back. Like, they're buddies. They're bros. He helped him build this island. So then he says, you want to know if I did a sloppy job? If you have time to sit there and doubt me, then come over here and see my work for yourself, you ungrateful brat. Basically saying, like, dude, don't screw with me right now. I just killed my best friend. Like, don't talk about if I did my job or not. So then we skip to the giant pirates, right? The Straw Hats. So they're kind of calling back on things. It was the 5 elders, a Navy admiral, CP0, the Seraphim, and a blockade of battleships. It's such a miracle that we escaped that hell. I still can't entirely wrap my mind around it. I was rereading these chapters, and it's kind of crazy how OP the Gorosei are, right? We can kind of talk about it at the end of the chapter. But, like, the abilities of the Gorosei are insane. And I didn't really realize it until I, like, binged that whole fight. So then we cut to Zoro, of course, being Zoro. This is pathetic. He's one of the 4 emperors now, and he's moping over one geezer dying. So, of course, Zoro being a buzzkill. So then we cut to Lilith, right? She's in her PJs. So, can anyone tell me which of the Vegapunks are still alive? York is the one that was the spy. There should be a few that are still on Egghead that didn't officially get killed. So, besides the main Vegapunk sort of nexus and Lilith, who is still alive or not confirmed to be dead? I mean, they even say, oh yeah, we're in a cabin on the giant ship. Out of all the Vegapunks, we only brought you. That's funny. Lilith is supposed to be the evil character, but she's crying about everybody. So they cut to Luffy, and it's like a Dressrosa moment where he's depressed, but he's also starving. So this is interesting. Ah, I see. So you were feeling sad about me, Luffy. Well, don't worry. I've just heard it all. What do you mean? Why do you keep saying you heard it? I was crying earlier because I was sad about everyone else's death. But it is only death by your concept of it. You see, the truth is, in short, they're all alive. But to you, they're dead. My point is, you did keep your promise to me, so don't feel sad. That's the thing, right? Is they're all just sort of drones. They're like proxies. They are people, but they're also kind of like robots. So something I was asking in the previous chapter last week was like, what's the deal with the Nexus? Because they still have the main network. Like, there was Stella, the person who looked the most like Vegapunk, but that wasn't Vegapunk himself. Vegapunk himself is like that Nexus network on Egghead Island. And for all we know, that's undamaged. So as long as that's fine, like, all the Vegapunks could come back. So then, of course, Luffy's like, okay, cool. If that's fine, that's fine. So now they have a big party, right? Thanks to the giant pirates. We get a cute moment with Robin and Chopper saying, I can see Saul when we get to Elbaf. Love that. Regardless of what you think of Oda bringing Saul back, I think that'll be a really cute moment and a great character moment for Robin. So now they're kind of talking about like they're entering the race to find the One Piece. And Luffy says, I don't care if you guys end up as my enemies, you know it's going to be me in the end. Everyone's cheering, having a good time. And of course, when characters are having a good time in One Piece, that lasts for about 5 minutes before something tragic happens. Interestingly enough, we do get sort of a navigational frame of reference. The ship charts a course northeast. So, for all of you lore junkies out there, world building junkies out there, we do have a sense of what direction they're going in. They're en route to the storied land of Elbaf, home of the giants. So then we cut to the silhouette of a character who seemingly is a brand new character. Doesn't look like anyone we know. Interestingly enough, we get a title card that says Warland, New World Elbaf. Not quite sure what that means. Maybe there's a big war in Elbaf? Who knows? Anyway, I thought this was a solid chapter. I kind of like that we're getting this sort of cool down moment. I do hope that we do get sort of 1 or 2 more chapters before we go to Elbaf. I think it would be nice to sort of spend a little more time before we jump into another big arc, especially considering this could be like another huge arc like Dressrosa or, you know, Whole Cake. So it would be nice if we could get a little more of a transition, but we'll see. Elbaf will be good. Dude, Elbaf is going to be so good. We don't have all the bullshit expectations of Wano. We don't have, you know, the suspense of like Whole Cake. Like, it's just going to be a good silly goose time. I hope it's more of a setup chapter like Zoe. Yeah, that could be true. That's the thing. I don't want Elbaf to be crazy long. I would kind of like there to be some epic adventure, especially since it's like the fantasy island and like Vikings and giants and there's all this lore with Elbaf. But I wouldn't want it to be like that much longer than something like Zoe. I think Zoe is a really good expectation to have, a good comparison. What about you guys? How would you rate the One Piece chapter? I'd give it like, you know, like a 6 or 7. It was nothing crazy. I think the highlight of the chapter, interesting. So there's a couple of takeaways. Obviously, there's a bunch of little things. We get the silhouette of what appears to be a new character. You know, we get all these quotes from the characters. I think the 2 big takeaways from this chapter are Lilith confirming that the Vegapunks are still basically all alive. And then the character moment with Kizaru. Because Kizaru did get somewhat fleshed out in this arc, but I think this kind of is the defining moment for him. Seven? Yeah, I think 7 is pretty fair. Pokesel coming in with the hot takes as usual. The problem with Nobara is she is mad ugly. Hey, man. That's subjective. Any predictions on who that character is? I think it's too early for it to be a super important character. Like, I don't think it's the prince or the young king, the person who wanted to marry Big Mom. I don't think it's the Prince of Elbaf. It seems like it's a brand new character, right? That's what it feels like it's setting up to. So it's hard to say who that would be. And plus, when you look at that panel, it's pretty vague. They just look like they're sitting on the coast of an island. Gotta head out. Just want to say that. Have a great stream. Thanks, Postal. Pleasure to hear from you, man. Always good to see you. We'll have to chat soon, for sure. Been a hot minute. When Luffy dies, the whole manga anime is going to be unknown. Kind of too late for that. One Piece is arguably the biggest manga of all time. Anyway, those are the 2 big chapters I wanted to read today. Ordinarily, I would read 1 or 2 more chapters, but I am currently in the middle of batching the next month's worth of videos. So, plus I have not had lunch yet. So I'll take like 1 or 2 more questions, but we'll go ahead and wrap up the stream. OG, I'm curious, what did you think of the casting of the recent One Piece live action cast? I like the casting for Vivi. The casting for King Cobra is weird. He seems kind of young to be playing an older king. I forgot who they said was going to be playing Dr. Kuroha, but I like that casting. I just can't remember their name. Chopper is weird. I don't know what the hell they're going to do with Chopper. Like, is he going to be AI or CGI? And then like, when he transforms, it's going to be a live actor? I don't know. That has me kind of skeptical. But on that note, when am I going to do a face reveal? Very soon. I have a camera and everything. I just got to set up the time. Anyway, on that note, thank you to everyone for another great stream. We had an amazing turnout for the stream. One of the highest peak viewers in a while. So glad to see everyone turn up for the stream. Great discussion as always. Got a good feel for how people were reacting to this chapter. Yeah, so we'll see how JJK turns out, and I'm excited to see what happens next. In any event, thank you, as always. Glad to see you all. Glad to see all the regular faces. And I hope to hear from you soon. Peace.